We will be speaking about Pesach tonight, and particularly focused on Matzah through the lens of the Maharal in his Sefer Gevurot Hashem, which speaks about Pesach. And particularly in Perek Nun Aleph, that's where the Maharal really picks up on the Haggadah, and he begins with Magid. And just a bit of background information, there are at least two mitzvahs midoraita on Seder night. There are two mitzvahs min Torah. The first is, or one of them at least, is eating matzah, right? Of course, you can't just get out of this obligation by eating a thimbleful. There's a certain requisite amount that one has to eat on Seder night. And another one, of course, is Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, telling over the story of leaving Egypt, right? That is the Haggadah. That's what it's called after. That's why the longest section in the Haggadah is Magid, right? Telling over the story of leaving Egypt. That's why it's based on the pasuk that says "V'higarata levencha," and you should tell this over to your children. That's the background. And what's interesting about this section is it begins with "Halach ma'anya," this poor bread, and we have to understand, what does this mean? Why are we introducing with this? What's the key here, and why poor bread specifically? What's that meant to teach us? So the Maharal really picks up on this theme, and he actually offers a couple of answers, and he rejects both of them. It's like that's not the pshat. He says, because it's lachmoni, because it's so low as opposed to chametz, which is blown up, or because that's what the Egyptians used to feed the Jewish people in Egypt. And he rejects both of them. He's like, no, that's not the answer. Rather, omnam pirusha davar ki hamatzah nikra lechem oni hefech matzah ashira. It's the opposite of matzah ashira, of wealthy bread, of rich bread. What's matzah ashira? Shekasher yesh ba shemen udvash nikret ashira. Ki hadavar hazeh ma'ashir halechem. If a person bakes matzah with oil, or bakes matzah with honey, or with eggs, right? Egg matzah is the same thing. It's rich matzah. It's not lechem oni. It's not poor bread. And that's a big problem. We don't actually fulfill our mitzvah of eating matzah with egg matzah. That's why we're particular not to have that when we go to motzi matzah. We don't do it on egg matzah. We do it on the simple matzah, on the pure matzah. But why? What's it meant to teach us? And so he says, because the poor man has only himself. Atmo de gufo, himself and his body, and that's it. And that's what the matzah is supposed to represent. If we start bringing in oil and honey and eggs and all these other things that flavor the matzah, you're reducing the mitzvah from what it's meant to be, from what it's supposed to be. And then he goes on. He says, because how does he explain it? He says, "V'hamatzah gamken kasher ein ba rak etzem ha'isa she'atzmot ha'isa hu ha'mayim v'ha'kemach." Right, the matzah has only the absolute bare minimum, the skeleton of what it needs. That is to say, what's dough? What's the purest essence of dough? It's flour and it's water, and that's it. There's no oil. There's no spices. There's nothing else. That's it. And that's what he says. Ha'isa she'atzmon ha'isa hu ha'mayim v'ha'kemach v'zehu atzmon isa v'bezeh have lechem oni. That is poor bread. That's it. But the Maharal has a question. He says, you might say, "V'ulai yikshalacha ma inyan ha'aniyut ala cherut." What does freedom have to do with poverty? These two things seem to be complete opposites. And when a person thinks, I went free, they don't think, I went free with only the clothing on my back. I had nothing, I had no assets. I had no wealth to spend. That's not freedom. That sounds terrible. That's poverty. These two things don't work together. He says, no, that's ein zakasha. He says, that davar ze ein kasha. Why? He says the Maharal, ki ha'aniyut be'atzmo hora al ha'geula. Poverty is an instruction about redemption. She'ein inyan ha'geula rak she'yotze ve'en lo shum tziruf el zulato. What's freedom? Freedom means freedom from any other connectors, from anything else that bonds you to anything else. The classic image of a person going free is releasing the shackles, right, of the door opening. There's nothing restraining you. There's nothing bonding you to anything else. And that's often what wealth does. Wealth will bond us. It'll keep us in a certain place, right? It'll keep us from doing other things that we want to be doing. We have to be looking after our investments. We have to be making the insurance claim. We have to be dealing with this patient or with this client, it's wealth, and thank God. But it keeps us bonded to something. But when you don't have those things, when you're stripped of anything material, then you're unbounded. You're free. And then the way he ends this specific paragraph is Fikasher ein kan hitstarfut as nimtzet geula. When you're not connected to, like when you're not bound to anything, when you're not joined to something else, that's when you're free. Not being joined, being like separate from other things, that's freedom. And that makes sense. When a person wants to go do his own thing, when he thinks of, I have to stay home and take care of my family or my kids or my wife and all these other things, or again, I have to watch over my house, I have to stay here, it's my primary residence, and if I want to get the tax benefits, it's just that's not freedom. You're being imprisoned. But there's a deeper lesson here, and this is where we really want to focus. He says that we were actually, just another allusion. He actually speaks about how there's another allusion to this in terms of when were we redeemed. We were redeemed in Nisan. And if we're paying attention to the Torah refers to Nisan as Rosh Chodashim. Nisan is Chodesh HaRishon. It's the first month, not Tishrei, which is when Rosh Hashanah is. The way Rosh Hashanah is called in or referenced in the Torah is HaChodesh HaShvi, the 7th month. The first month is Nisan, and says Maharal, when you're first, right, you're not bound to anything else. You have no hitstarfut, there's no joining of anything else. You're first. When you're first in line, you don't care about who's behind you because you're first. There's nothing connecting you. You're independent from other things, right? Or for example, if you want to buy a piece of property, you're first in title. Well, you have to worry about anyone who came before you because it's only you. So that's part of his the evidence he summons to build this case about this idea of being not having hitstarfut to other things. That's freedom. That's what teaches us about freedom. But he goes further, and he says like this: Lefikach rawi me'achshav she'alechem hu lechem oni mitzad ha'aniyut siba lecherut. He says poverty is actually the reason for your freedom. Ki ha'inyan asher hu muvdal mikol osher mikol echut rawi beyoter liknot malay elokit. Because a person who's separated from all wealth and from all quality, I'm assuming quality of life, he's more fitting to acquire these godly dispositions. And that's something that you don't get with Matzah Ashira. That's not present. You can't fulfill your mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach with Matzah Ashira. You've missed the point. And that's a very difficult idea to understand. What does that mean? Poverty is what acquires my freedom? Poverty is the reason for my freedom? Look, where do we see this? What's the proof? And in fact, very interestingly, J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, she seems to say this actually almost explicitly in her Harvard commencement speech in 2008, which she said was like this. So it wasn't the idea here was really through poverty. She was speaking more about failure, but we'll see that poverty played an enormously important role. So what she said was, what I fear most for myself at your age was not poverty but failure. Right? So here I'm quoting verbatim. This is exactly what she says. I think it fair to say that by any conventional measure, a mere 7 years after my graduation day, I had failed on an epic scale. An exceptionally short-lived marriage had imploded, and I was jobless, a lone parent, and as poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. And then about 50 seconds later she says, failure meant a stripping away of the inessential. I stopped pretending to myself that I was anything other than what I was, and began to direct all my energy into finishing the only work that mattered to me. Had I really succeeded at anything else, I might never have found the determination to succeed in the one arena I believed I truly belonged. I was set free. Those are her words. Let's look back at the Maharal. Lefikach rawi me'achshav shehalechem hu lechem oni mitzad ha'aniyut siba lecherut. Poverty is the reason for the freedom. Right? Ki ha'inyan asher hu muvdal mikol osher mikol echut. Right? What happens? and you're stripped away from everything. That's all you are. And what does he say? You have to be as you are. I stopped pretending to myself to be anything. I stopped pretending to myself that I was anything other than what I was. Kemoshehu, as I was. And moreover, again, failure meant a stripping away of the inessential. It says, what's the Maharal say? כי העניות בעצמו הוראה על הגאולה, שאין עניין הגאולה רק שיוצא ואין לו שום צירוף אל זולתו. Right? There's no connection to anything else. And זהו עצמו עיסא ובזה הביא לחם עוני. Sorry, what does he say? וזה כי עני שאין לו אלא עצמו ואין לו ממון רק עצמו וגופו. He has no money, he has nothing, all he has is himself. והמצווה גם כן, כאשר אין לו רק עצם העיסא שעצמו תעיסא הוא המים והקמח, וזהו עצמו עיסא ובזה הביא לחם עוני. All it is it's water and it's flour, and that's it. It's the stripping away of the inessential. That's what matzah is. We don't put any oil in it, we don't put honey in it, we don't put eggs in it, we don't put salt in it, we don't put anything in it. All we put is flour, water, that's it. Anything else that doesn't belong, it's not inside. That's lechem oni, and that is what teaches us about freedom. This is the critical message of the halach ma'anya, right? Of the matzah, of a central theme of the cherut of Pesach, and that's the instruction. That's where we'll end for today, and we'll see you next time. Chag Sameach, Chag Kasher V'Sameach.